Hey everyone and welcome back. I think it's time to talk about Tron. Tron is a combo deck that is really nothing new for the format. I mean, X has been a strategy, a tier 3 strategy for forever in Pauper, but it hasn't been playable for a lot of time. And right now, the deck seems to be good in the current metagame. But why? Well, people asked me why X-Strom seems to be playable right now and what it makes good compared to the previous metagame. I think we have at least two main causes. The first one is we have Deadly Dispute, which is a great addition to the deck. We also have Mystical Teachings, and alongside Deadly Dispute, basically make the shell of the deck. Well, we also have the Urzaland, because Scattershot, Weather Storm, and also Frantic Salvage are all instant spell, and you are able to fetch for them with Mystical Teachings, obviously. Another reason of why X seems to be playable or popular in the current metagame is the last banned ban updates and also the print of experimental synthesizer. So basically, a large amount of burst metalcraft and affinity makes Extron a real deck. Why? Because thanks to the presence of burst and affinity, playing aggro in Pauper seems bad in the current metagame. Unless you are playing a sort of Voltron style deck in form of Boggles or even Mono White Heroic or Mono Red Heroic, which seems kind of having a lot of interest in the last few weeks. Extron doesn't really have any negative matchup because Extron seems weak to turn 4 kill decks. For example, Elves is probably a bad matchup for X. Burn seems to be bad unless you draw your 8 cards in form of Weather Storm or Golden Egg. I think we don't really have anything. We don't really have a lot of decks able to kill on turn 4 right now, because Walls doesn't seem to be played a lot. Goblin Combo is also a deck that you may face on Magical Line or on paper, but Mogwarts seems also weak to Crackling Shaman, and currently the red Metalcraft decks, Affinity and Boros, run both Crackling Shaman and Makeshift Munitions, and those red cards are great against aggressive strategies or green swarm decks, for example Wolves or Elves. I think the deck is good, but right now is still missing something. The shell, in my opinion, is still great and is not really missing a lot. I think you just need to toying with the amount of lands or cards like Foundry Inspector, because most times you don't really try to combo off in a single turn, but you try to generate a state of the game where your opponent is not able to win. But keep in mind that the deck is still a combo deck, it's not any sort of control deck similar to Flickertron. Flickertron was a control deck because thanks to cards like Mnemonic Wall, Ephemerate, Dignitary, and Moments Piece, where Flickertron was able to lock the opponent from the combat phase or lock the opponent's resources. For example, Ephemerate with Prohibit or any other counterspell is great against any card vintage deck or Fairies deck or control decks. Extron is weak to both aggressive strategies and both control-ish strategies because linear card vintage is really weak to cards like Ephemerate and also 2 counter spells. But anyway, Tron does run a lot of card advantage, and having that much card advantage is what I think that makes the deck really makes this deck real. So basically, what is the game plan of the nowadays X-Tron deck? Well, if you are able to go to the long play, if you are in your late game, you can now land a 1 Foundry Inspector or more Foundry Inspector, draw your deck, and then you are able with Golden Foundry or Jace Erasure to loop your artifacts with Conjurer's Babel, because if you don't have any cards in your deck, you basically have a loop with Conjurer's Babel. You target one Babel in your graveyard, you put the Babel on the bottom of your deck, but there's not any other cards in your deck, so you draw another Babel. You continuously draw and play your Conjurer's Babel, generating an infinite storm count and an infinite artifact count for Golden Foundry, which says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may put a church counter on Golden Foundry. Remove 3 church counter from Golden Foundry, put a 3/3 or less golem artifact creature on the battlefield, so you can swarm your battlefield with an infinite amount of Golden Foundry. Or with Jace Erasure, you can draw your deck and force your opponent to mill his deck. Jace Erasure does say that whenever you draw a card, you can also mill a card from a target player deck. So I think you already understood how the deck is able to win in a late game. But anyway, as I said, it can generate a board state or a game state where your opponent is not able to win. Most times is something like I play a Thunder Marauder, and then my opponent is not able to how am I say it, to win the game, because you can get an infinite amount of lives, and with an infinite amount of life, not infinite, no, but you can get a lot of lives, and that make when you have a lot of cards in hand, a lot of mana, a lot of life, and your opponent is playing a deck that can win only with the combat step, for example Affinity or Burst, you can then just try to win with the combat step, and Scattershot, you can kill all their creatures. So basically you just play a sort of control-ish style strategy where you try to take some time and kill your opponent threats. Or at least when I face Boros and Affinity, I try to do that. You don't really need for Jace Erasure or Golden Foundry against those decks. Especially Science Foundry Marauder is obviously great against both Boros and Affinity. I think we should take a look on how the deck evolved. I didn't really search for a non-Urza X deck, because basically they run the same kind of card. But I'll say that the first time I was able to see an Urza X list was on 2018. On a metagame.it article, and the deck was basically the same deck, with 4 copies of Eternal Sculptor instead of Foundry Inspector, and 2 cast instead of Deadly Dispute. Obviously this deck list was weaker because didn't run Teachings plus Weather Restore or Scattershot, and was obviously weaker against interactive decks or aggressive strategies, so for that reason on 2018 wasn't really playable. But then I think in 2000, yeah, February, on February 2022, Entropy started toying around with Galvanic Relay in Combo Tron. So basically the deck was the most similar to the nowadays deck list, with Disciple of the Vault as a combo finisher instead of Jace Razor, and Galvanic Relay as a way to draw that many cards. It wasn't playing Deadly Dispute plus Equal Wellspring, right? Yeah, it was playing only 4 copies of Galvanic Relay. My opinion, probably the current X-Tron is better without Galvanic Relay, because Galvanic Relay was obviously great, but probably the deck was relying too much on Galvanic Relay and Foundry Inspector. Current deck list is much better because Teachings and Dispute are better to interact. It allows to interact those cards, and allows you to interact better with most strategies. I think that this is the first version without Galvanic Relay, with 4 copies of Expedition Map. It was already playing Deadly Dispute. It was main decking Clear the Mind instead of Frantic Salvage, and Frantic Salvage you can fetch it with Mystical Teachings. I think the deck right now isn't weak. You can probably try to cut some cards and try to add some other cards, trying to make it better. I think I'll try something with it. Not sure if I'll play it on Twitch or on YouTube. I mean, I'm a huge fan of combo decks, but X-Tron doesn't really seem an enjoyable deck when you want to see NTG content. Maybe you that are watching my video, maybe you just want to see some more interactive deck, but I think that anyway this deck is able to gift some enjoyable games. Also, as I said, most times you don't really need to win via the combo finisher. You can just try to play a sort of worse flicker Tron deck, because you don't really have a lot of interactive spells. And if your metagame is not filled with decks like Jeskai Ephemerate or aggressive strategies, for example Burgles or Stompy or Elves or Wolves combo, I think I can recommend it to you. Burn seems to be a good matchup for this deck. It's kind of surprising since you are playing both a combo deck and a Ursatron deck, but you run Weather the Storm and Golden Egg, and if you are fast enough, you can and you are able to draw your 8 card. Then Burn doesn't really do anything relevant against you. The deck is also weak to land denial spells, since it doesn't run any counter spells besides Duress, doesn't run any flicker spells or Pulse of Murasa, so there's no recursion or any sort of counter spell. Also is weak to Ephemerate decks, because Ephemerate plus counterspell or usually destroy you, and decks like Familiar or Jeskai often runs cards like Dust to Dust or random enchantment aids, for example Natus Chant or the Doombringer Cleric. So decks can be good in the right metagame, but it clearly has its negative matchups. So guys, thank you for watching this video. see you later in the next video in the week. Not sure if I'll upload anything on my exclusively for YouTube, but I started playing again on Twitch. I started streaming again on Twitch, so I can assure you that I'll upload some replays from my Twitch channel. See ya!